Welcome to Unlocking High Performance, a podcast for leaders who believe great results should never come at the expense of their people. I'm Jason Lauritsen, an advisor to CEOs and leadership teams who want to accelerate performance without burning people out. Today, I'm joined by Chris Sund. Chris is the president and COO of UnityMed and GQR Healthcare, and COO of Nebula, where he operates at the intersection of healthcare staffing and AI-driven talent strategy. He helps lead one of the largest healthcare staffing platforms in the country, supporting hospitals and health systems nationwide. Known for scaling teams and building high-performing cultures, Chris helped grow UnityMed from $5 million to over $60 million in just 2 years, earning the number 3 spot on the Inc. 5000 list in the Midwest. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Jason.
All right. Well, before we get in and start kind of digging in on the conversation today, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your companies that you lead. And you always kind of like to set the stage in terms of what your organization looks like, or how big it is, how distributed it is, how you work in terms of, these days, what is the workplace policy? Is everybody on site? Are people remote? Is it something in between? So would you tell us a little bit about your organizations, please?
Yeah, well, let's start off there. So UnityMed is a healthcare staffing brand. We service hospitals and healthcare facilities of all types across the country. So does GQR Healthcare. So we have 2 brands that, due to acquisition, are under the same family. We have great clients on both sides that know us that way. And so we do everything. You need a doctor, you need a physical therapist or nurse. We help staff that. We also, with GQR, do other lines of businesses. So we service Workday customers as a certified partner. We do life sciences, technology. So there's other arenas that we do within recruitment services, everything from permanent search to contract workers. And then we have Nebula. And Nebula is this home-built language learning model. So it is AI, and it is a tool. We have 200 million candidates from the US market, which is about 90% of the total US labor market. And using AI, it is able to stack rank. If you're trying to hire for, let's say, a data engineer, it's going to look for who they believe is the best, and it's going to stack rank those. But what's really amazing, it actually allows a recruiter to go in and it can start emailing and texting those people and engaging for you. So it can do outreach. You still program it just the way you would talk, and it uses that natural language, your tone, and kind of gives you superpowers to be able to reach more people than you could ever do on your own.
Cool. So tell me about your workforce.
So the workforce, we are divided from an office standpoint with 3 offices. So we have Omaha, Nebraska, Austin, Texas, and New York City for 3 office locations. And then we have a remote workforce that are all over from corner to corner. We got employees in Alabama and Florida and other areas in New York and Alaska. We've got a few people in Alaska, actually. So we cross a blend of in-office and remote workforce, and couple hundred employees total internally. Okay. And then externally at another about 1,000 people that are out there still as our employees or W-2. A lot of them are, the majority of them are externally.
Okay. Got it. Thank you for that. So we today are going to talk about kind of, or at least I want to unpack how you think about experience and the importance of being intentional about the experiences that you create. And when you and I were talking about kind of what you would be excited to talk about and where you think you're having impact internally with your team and things that really set you apart, this was a thing that you kind of got excited about. So I wanted to ask you to tell us more about it. So let's start just, I guess, with generally, tell me why you feel being intentional about the experiences you create is so important.
I think the experiences we give are really what separates people's decisions on where they want to work or who they want to work with. And I think that's, more often than not, that's a human experience. When you give somebody a reason, a moment that you go above and beyond, you have the opportunity to create what I call a raving fan. And I define a raving fan as somebody that goes out and they're going to bring you up in conversation with other people. They find it so compelling that they want to tell other people how much they like you. And so, there's a lot of different ways you can create that experience. An easy analogy that I like to think of is you could take 3 separate fast food chains that sell, let's say, chicken nuggets. And each business model can have their own. And whatever your identity is, you should stick to it. So you could have one identity that goes, I'm going to sell 20 nuggets for $5. And I'm going to be known as the place where you get a good value, right? And then you can have another one that goes, I have made technology that you can order on an app, you can order on a kiosk. You really don't have to even talk to somebody. We're going to be consistent. We're going to get that ready for you, and you know what you're going to get. And be more technology facing and automation. You can have another one that goes, we're going to be the one that when you walk in the door, we want you to feel like your family, and we're going to go out of our way to give you a totally different human experience. Each of them do well, and all those, I without giving the business names, but there is that last one. Whenever I tend to see this particular restaurant without naming it out loud, there tends to be a line wrapped around them, no matter what city I travel to in the country. And that was kind of our philosophy, is we do the same thing at the heart of it as all these other competitors. So if you're going to choose at the end of the day to come work for us or with our company versus all of our competitors out there, we want to make sure that what we are delivering has as little friction as possible. It's such a great experience. And that goes way past just maybe that one customer interaction. The experience is, everything from before they even get there till after they leave there is what I would say encounters experience.
So I know that you think about experience that way. I mean, that's the great description or example of the power of experience when it comes to kind of the customer side. And I know that from our earlier conversation, you also know that or believe that then the employee experience is sort of what powers and creates that. And so can you share kind of how you think about that and how you came to kind of understand the linkage between the two, and maybe share an example of a specific experience, maybe internally that has emerged or that you created with intention that you think then very directly impacts customer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we created experience as a thematic goal a couple years ago. And what I call a thematic goal is a little different than your mission statement and vision statement. I see the thematic goal as you go through different seasons as a company. And, unfortunately with the market, our thematic goal has not been as much on experience as it's been doing less with more, just due to the economy. But when it was more, hey, this is right now in this season, it's about the experience. What we did is we divided that into the clients we serve, the candidates we work with, and our employees. So there's 3 buckets that we truly need to serve. And then we divided every part of the company. So you have marketing, you have your finance team, you have operations, you have your technology, you have HR, sales, etc. So we took, I call like a giant wheel, and all of them play some part. Maybe it's a website interaction, or it doesn't even have to be maybe it's a billing or an invoicing, or it's a question they have when they call in. Whatever it is, everybody at some way owns something that can help that. And so every quarter we would ask them to set a goal or set a few different goals and OKRs, I would say. And those would be centered around, what are you going to do 3 months from now that is going to make the experience for one of those 3 categories better? Preferably you have something that affects, 3 different things that could affect all of those. But we want to push them to go, man, by the time these 3 months are done, or by the end of this year, I want it to be milestone experience ideas here. Not just checking a quick box that you can do in a day. something that you go back and go, man, that was a huge lift, but we're really happy we did that lift. Like, we are now offering something that's really nice for them to have. And so I'll look simple ones. I say simple ones, but a huge impact was HR. HR at that time, that leader took it upon herself and went, we should reach out and see how we can get more perks and benefits without necessarily costing the company more money. And so we do a lot of work where people have to travel. And so she went out of her way to find out, can we get corporate discounts with Hilton or Marriott or, IHG Hotels, Wyndham? Maybe we get rental cars and we could pass that to all our employees and give that discount. Maybe we get a discount at a gym, whatever that is. But went out of the way going, hey, if we can save our people money, or we can give the ability when they're going on vacation to get a better deal, I'm going to start building these connections and taking time to reach out and finding ways we can enhance. And those are just options without even affecting our budget that she came up with.
Sure. So in that process, what have been some of I'm curious about, because it sounds like from what you had told me that you encourage all employees to be thinking about sort of experience and the process of experience and how you create experience sort of on an ongoing basis. And so I guess I am fascinated about what that looks like, how you continue or how you sort of encourage them to do that. And when they do have ideas for how to improve things, what does that look like? Do they kind of take the action themselves and kind of play around and then come back and report on it? Are they raising ideas up that get considered? What if it requires some kind of budget or investment to explore or invest? How do you handle, first, how do you invite them into the process? And then how do you manage, if they believe you that they want to see ideas, how do you manage the ideas when they come?
That's a great question. And there's not a single answer to it. I think, first of all, it's if you're going to have a thematic goal, your missions, your values, it's important that you regularly talk about them. I'd say starting off weekly, monthly meetings is really understanding that if this is that important, that we wrote this down and said, this is our goal, then everyone should know the goal in the company. And that doesn't mean we tell them once and we expect them to hear it. We're going to have to repeat it in front of them. And so if that's a goal, what are we doing to move the needle? So we would give a company update once a month. Those company updates would include things around those goals. So if you're going to highlight it, it's not about just saying, here's maybe our sales numbers, how we're doing as a business, but let's highlight those wins. If people are going out of their way to do that, we're going to highlight it. We're going to highlight the employees that maybe had the idea or the employees that drove it there. And then the overarching goals as well. And then at the end of the quarter, we'd all sit down as a leadership team and we give updates. Because we put these out there. How are we doing? Are we on task? Are we going to get this done? Are we going to have to push it? Is it something that we're going to tell people we can't do? We need to make sure that we're telling the whole company never knows. And then what happens is when you're doing that, it empowers the employees. They see, wow, maybe I want to get recognized or I want to be a part of that. I've got a great idea. I think most of the time they would send it up to their leader. Maybe sometimes they take it to myself or somebody else, but I've seen it from all boards. And sometimes they're really good ideas and they fit in. Other times, I don't want to say they weren't good ideas, but maybe they didn't fit with the budget or they were so outlandish. We're like, that would be really cool for us to have from an employee experience to have maybe a slide in the office, but we're not going to put a slide in the office. It's not cool as that would be, right? So I've also seen some ideas where I'm like, I'm not saying that wouldn't be nice to have, but it's on the budget to maybe do that in the kitchen. So sorry.
Sure.
I'll put that one on the back burner.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you do open the door for that too. I mean, I've had plenty of fun conversations where like, where do we draw the line? Can we do this?
Yeah.
And you don't know if you don't ask.
If you're going to, yeah, that's right. If you're going to open the door, they're going to bring all kinds of ideas, like you said, good ideas, bad ideas, and everything in between. So I'm curious about when you are thinking about, as you're, and I'm sure this is probably more common with like customer experience as you're trying to, move the needle forward there. I guess, how do you collect insight or feedback that helps with, number one, identifying maybe where there's an opportunity for experience to get better. But then also, I am curious about how do you track and measure whether something new you're trying, some kind of new innovation to service that you're trying, is having the impact that you hoped for? Like, how are you, knowing when it's time to, well, that seemed like a good idea, not having the impact we thought. How do you pick that up? And then what do you do with that when it happens?
Wow. A lot of great questions. Trying to think which one I want to dive into first out of all those. Well, let me ask you, which one would you like to start? I feel like I could divide that up into.
Well, let's start with feedback that you use, or how do you collect feedback that helps you decide where you want to dig in on experience?
So some of that, we put it into each department head. And I think how they collect it is different ways. It can be, when we always describe, look for the friction. Where is there something that maybe a customer, they're on our website, and what are questions they ask us? Because if they're asking us questions, that means we are not explaining it to them on our website well enough. Or it's just, so let's make it easy. Let's find the things that they want to know and make sure that we're giving those resources at their fingertips, so that we can make it more accessible. If it is there, then they can't find it. So one, it's looking at simple things like that, or friction can be anything of just like, man, they called in and they had to get transferred twice or this many times to get an answer. It took them this long to get a response. That's friction. When I need something and I get put on hold or talk to a robot or I get a runaround, I don't know about you, but I can't stand that. And we talk about what is a great experience and what isn't. Let's not be the place that's doing that. And so the leaders, for each of them to own their area is for them to think in that perspective and to come up with their ideas with their team. They would work with their team and bring them to the table. And when I would work with them, it's not about maybe having a better idea than them. These are their ideas. They feel passionately. They explain them. I might challenge them to try to make them bigger or make sure they're achievable or realistic and go, hey, this is great, but can we quantify what we're doing today and what's a quantifiable great result? And can we do that realistically in this time frame? But outside of that, even if I seen a scenario where someone's like, we're going to run with this, and I've seen it play out and go, then you could probably run it better this way. I learned from one of my best colleagues who gave me feedback, because I didn't always do this. Just let them run with it. That maybe you're right. That's maybe an 80% answer, and maybe there's a 90% answer. And past me has plenty of times been like, we should do this. And then you deflate the room. You deflate their idea, their enthusiasm, and you're probably going to get more letting them just run with their idea and do it because it's their idea and they love it, than trying to be like, you should do this instead, and deflating that out there.
Yeah. Wait to be helpful when it's actually helpful. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
really
a hard lesson to learn though, man. The discipline of that is hard to learn.
It is. And I tell people like, that to me is what makes a great leader. The guy that, made sure he pulled me aside after a meeting where I definitely, I gave the advice, I deflated the room and reminded me that you're right. Probably your idea is maybe a little better, but would it have killed you to let him run with it? Was the medicine, that's what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. And I'm thankful that he is open to doing that. And the leaders that I personally have worked with, that I have some of the best I've ever worked with, the most respect, are always the ones that tell you what you need to hear, because that's how you get better and you learn, is from those that are going to open it up and say this. And unfortunately, a lot of times people are intimidated or scared to give feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. It's often, it doesn't always taste good, but it's always pretty nourishing usually if you can make the space for it. So, well, that's good. So question 1 we got. Now let's go back to question 2, which is, if we do this, right? So you have these ideas coming and you're going to run with them, and some of them are going to be better than others, or some of them are going to be more fully cooked than others. How do you, and I don't know, like, do you have a formal process for that, or how do you kind of handle and know if something is working, if something is having the impact that's intended, and if it's not, how do you handle that?
Great question. Reviews are really the best ways to do surveys. And so internally, externally, we very regularly would do them. And we, most of the times that would be third parties that would reach out to all of our clients and candidates that we'd work out with, as well as internally in doing workplace surveys. You get so much out of that if you take the time to digest it. And I think that's the key. There's one thing you just do a survey to do a survey, and it's what you do afterwards. And I can't say, man, we fixed every problem we ever got, but we would dissect it in the room. We'd categorize it. We would put into buckets, recurrent themes, and you can kind of see then, wow, this got brought up on more than one time. That's obviously something we need to lean into, and we need to improve that. And so you can kind of prioritize that way and go, based on this, not saying that one person's comment isn't valid. If there's time, we should also fix that. But you kind of chip away and go, it looks like here's the biggest areas. And then as we're writing our goals for the next quarter, or if you could start sooner, why don't we start doing something about what these things are?
All right. So I'm gonna give you a chance to kind of just highlight some things that you're proud of relative to experience. So what would you say when you think about it? Can you tell me about, I would love to hear you talk about an experience that you created, an experience that exists, that kind of got created, that you think has been really effective and has had a real, an outsized impact. And I'll give you can talk about one on the customer side, one on the employee side, but I'm just curious to hear you share some wins about, where you feel like you've really found some interesting ways to create an experience that's having a really great result.
Ooh, that's hard to narrow down which ones. And I feel like on the customer side, there's so many different ways I can go with that. And whatever one I pick, I feel bad because it's kind of like telling my other groups, like, yours wasn't as strong. So it's hard to say, like, this is a standout one that did it. I'm going to go, though, because it was a pretty big lift for them to do, and it was a candidate-facing one. With healthcare, there's a lot of nuances if you are trying to work from state to state, depending on what specialty you are. So a nurse that lives in one state can't necessarily go work in another state always. There's different rules and there's different prices. And sometimes it could take you months to get a license as well. And that's really, to think a nurse is going to have all that knowledge is not realistic. To think of any of our employees to know all 50 states and the rules is pretty unrealistic. And to find it is really complicated, like extremely complicated. And guess what? It's different for a nurse and a physical therapist and a CNA and so many specialties that each have their own regulations and rules. And so we're like, we're going to find all these regulations, rules. We're going to build the guide. We're going to be the one that researches every state. How long does it take? How much would it cost? How do we do it? We're going to make it really easy. So if somebody's interested and they want to know, we're going to find it. It was a pain in the butt lift to build all that out and then design it in a way to make it easy to read on a website to find. But man, the amount of help that's caused, I've seen it shared in groups online and social media, I've seen people like, hey, have you seen this website? They have what you're looking for here. The work's there, and we didn't know at the time that was going to happen, but I've seen other people sharing it out there as like, here's a good resource. It's on this company's website. So that's external. Internal, so many great ones. In our leadership team, I think always was focused on how to make the employees' lives as good as we possibly can. I think, something that stood out for a while was probably our employee resource groups. That was a great idea. Director of culture, I think, really kicked that off from an idea standpoint, but she rallied around different people to get it going. And that was really employee driven on what do they care about, what's important to them. And we had different ERGs that were created based on what they cared about. And then they ran those committees and those meetings, and they'd help decide on events and things we would rally behind as a company. And I can think of countless initiatives, moments, whatever. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but memories that I think a lot of employees would go back and say are core memories, and they're probably tied to a lot of those events. If I asked our employees some of their favorite days, at work over the last few years, they're not going to say sitting at their desk, pounding out a spreadsheet or making a sales call either. Even if it was a great big sale, it's probably still a highlight, but they're not. It's going to be the silly thing that we filled 20 some balloons for their birthday and decked it all out and made a big deal. Or we celebrated, we did a baby shower for this employee, or we played Mario Kart in the parking lot with little kid bikes and balloons and Mario Kart pillows, which did happen. It's those silly games and those moments that you go do at work that people will always remember and laugh. And encouraging the team, the company to come up with those things and put it out there and be intentional about creating those memories and events, I would say that's definitely been one of the highlights of it.
So I love I have a follow-up on that, but I love the putting the guide together is that's a textbook example of tons of friction. And so we created something to remove friction. That's kind of awesome. What a great example of what it looks like to notice friction and then tackle it, go to the core of it. But on the employee stuff, I am, and this is just because I hear this all the time. What is your response to the people that say, in this kind of era we're in we've kind of returned to the era of productivity worship, which sort of the argument there is we don't have time for, Mario Kart races and birthday parties or whatever, because that's time that they're not being productive. That's time that is undercutting what we're asking them to do or paying them to do. I'm curious from your perspective, how do you answer that criticism or pushback from people that maybe don't get the power in these experiences?
Great question. I think there's a balance there. So you can incorporate fun and memories and things that are important to the company and still be extremely productive and have high performance. And I would argue that I believe that really productive people are extremely proud employees, or the most productive. If I had a leader come to me, we were having a talk maybe a month ago, and I was asking how the team was going, who was doing really well, who was struggling. And she had named a few people struggling. And I said, if you had to rate the pride of the team now, and just curious, who would be your people that you think have the most pride right now? They just love working here and everything about it. She said, these ones would probably have the highest. I said, well, coincidentally, it's also the ones that she thought was the easiest to coach and, made life pretty good in that spot. So what about the other ones? And then, she had already given all of them. There's a correlation there, right? Do we know if they're proud? And if they're not, is there a reason? There probably is. And it probably has to do, it could be a little bit about us or the environment. It could be the work itself, but do they feel seen? Do they feel like we care about them and that we're invested in their performance and who they are and how they do, and not just from a transactional work productivity standpoint, but do they understand what we're trying to do here and are they bought in? So that, to me, that pride in building that and that human connection of, gosh, we need to make sure that they love what they do and that they know we care about them and we want what's best for them. And so finding time for the things like a birthday or baby shower, those key important times, I think it's the best time well spent. I'm not saying you should goof off all day at work, but
Right.
a lot of the stuff we do is, I call it minute to win it type games. We're going to have a company meeting. If you can incorporate a 5, 10, whatever, even 15-minute silly game for a while before you get into the brass tacks and the numbers and everything else, they're going to go back to their desks laughing, smiling, probably telling their family and friends about it on the weekends and how much they love it. And then they go back and they grind. And they're doing it with a smile. Then if we just showed up and did the same thing without it, well, I think a happy employee is a more productive employee.
Feels like a perfect place to end. So, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to share what you're doing and what's working. Some great examples in here. I think for me, I love just the simple takeaway, like look for friction and do something about it, right? Try to remove the friction. Friction is where frustration lives. And so I think that's a really great takeaway for people. And, happy employee is a productive employee. Like, two great takeaways. So thank you. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate the conversation and appreciate your leadership.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure being on here, to say the least.
And thank you for listening. I hope you can use something from this conversation with Chris that you can take back into your organization to help both your people and your organization thrive. Till next time.